our perspective is we want all the pathways, we want all the companies to be successful because that's what it's going to take to get to 2050 net zero.
Welcome to the Time on Wing podcast Christmas edition. I'm Courtney Miller with Visual Approach Analytics. With me, as always, is Garrick Deschavan of Collateral Verifications. Garrick, who's our guest today?
Well, good afternoon, Courtney, and happy holidays once again, although by the time Courtney gets to this, it might be next year anyway. So happy
Easter.
New Year!
Happy Easter, everybody.
Happy Easter. So we have a great guest today. We have a gentleman called Ashwin Jadhav. So Ashwin is currently the VP of Business Development at 12, and I'm actually pretty excited to hear what those guys are up to. I think it sounds pretty cool. So Ashwin he serves on the boards of Muskoka Airport, the Forum for European Aerospace Market Analysts, and also the Transportation Research Board. He has been Associate Director and Senior Manager for Pratt & Whitney Canada. He was also has done some market forecasting and strategy for Bombardier Commercial Aircraft, which is where he met you, unfortunately. He was also Assistant Manager and Lease Analyst for IATA, and he was Research Assistant at the University of Illinois. He has a degree in, or MS in Aerospace Engineering from the University of Illinois. He was named in the top 20 under 40 in Canada by Wings Magazine this year, so we got a celebrity on board, so that's going to be pretty cool. Ashwin, this is your time on wing.
Just a quick intermission before we continue with the show. We do get a lot of questions about how our listeners can support the show, and frankly, the easiest way is to continue the spirit of the show, which is just to reach out to us at conferences. But we also run businesses as well, and you can support us by supporting a lot of the work that we do. You can support the work that I do through Visual Approach by visiting visualapproach.io, where we produce a lot of research and analysis, a lot of data visualizations.
From my side, obviously, I focus more on metals, so anything that's aircraft related, if you're looking for valuations, whether it's on aircraft engines, I'm happy to help with any of those types of projects. So we appreciate certainly the opportunities to work with all of you. And we certainly also appreciate just the fact that people are willing to listen to what we have to say and enjoy kind of our thoughts and takes on what we think is a fascinating industry. So thank you.
Okay, back to the show.
Ashwin, thank you very much for being on Time on Wing. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. As you probably know from hopefully all of the podcasts that you've listened to, all 23 of them, or 22 of them, actually. We always start with just kind of getting your take on how you guys started in aviation. So I'd love to hear it. So feel free.
Yeah, so my intro to aviation happened at a very, very young age. Back when I think aviation used to be this privileged club of folks that wear suits and travel. So my grandfather actually, he every time he boarded an aircraft, he was in a suit, a full suit, right? And he always
do this. Am I the only one that still?
Yeah, with the vest, right? The three-piece suit.
So that just everything my grandfather did, I was like in awe of already. And when he really took this seriously, I was like, wow, this is something that I want to experience, right? And so his son, my uncle, moved to Japan at some point and he settled there. And my grandfather used to go visit. And one summer he took me. So I very soon I started to realize that I don't want to leave the plane. Right. And each leg, I remember it was 3 legs. It was Mumbai to Bangkok to Hong Kong, and Hong Kong to Tokyo, and Cathay. It was all on Cathay. And it was a 747. It was just, I got introduced to the very, very best of stuff, right? Cathay's service was impeccable. The aircraft obviously was the queen of the skies. And I just didn't want to leave the plane, right? Even after we landed. And so ever since I was, 7 or 8, I started to get this, I just became in awe of the industry, about how things work, about planes and airports and different things, right? And then one thing led to another, and I just never found myself wanting a career away from aviation, right? So I explored various options. I wanted to become a pilot, an engineer, an air traffic controller, all at the same time. And someone had to sit me down and said, pick one, right? So I think I ended up going down the engineering path and never looked back since.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. That's a great story. Yeah, it's definitely the old time of flying where people took it as like a privilege, where it was like, wow, you're flying, you gotta dress up, it's like a thing, yeah. Which I mean, and yeah, to your first flight on Cathay, that's a pretty good way to go.
It's all downhill from there, baby.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and then you have to be disappointed today, right? When you're getting on airplanes, you're like, oh, this again. Yeah. I know. It's like, when is this over? How times have changed.
So I didn't realize, Ashwin, that you went to Illinois, University of Illinois. That's something that I didn't know about you. What did you study at Illinois?
I did my master's in aerospace engineering at the U of I in Urbana-Champaign, right? And it was, Big Ten, really, really one of the best experiences of my life. I think it was very challenging at first because I did my undergrad in Russia, and going from kind of Russian aircraft and Russian standards of education and all of that to then suddenly, well, this is Boeing and Airbus, so yeah, it was a challenge to begin with, but I think just the American education system is amazing, right? And I think just the experiences I got via the U of I have kind of shaped my entire career, personally and professionally, right? The circle of friends I made, some of them who ended up going to Purdue, even, right? Forgive them, but
even whoa, even. What does that mean?
This is a two-way street, Courtney, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm so glad. You just made my day.
Purdue has an aviation engineering program, right? I didn't know. Yeah. It's funny because I don't get to banter universities in aviation as much because it's so global and it's pretty much an American thing.
I mean, it's almost as good as Embry-Riddle, but it's okay.
I do kind of want to follow that thread. West Point. I didn't know that you had the connection to West Point. Was that after Illinois?
It was. West Point was actually part of the Pratt and Whitney thing.
Oh, okay.
So at some point, Pratt and Whitney, along with Collins and pretty much the entire Raytheon family, right? They started to send some of their senior leaders to West Point.
Very cool.
And after that, it kind of trickled down. So then, junior leaders started to go as well. So anybody who had, a director title and above. And I think now they've even expanded it to anybody who's managing a team, right? Such a magical place with so much history. And I think it just being there teaches you so much, right? Because you're just surrounded by folks who have been through really difficult times, and have kind of enhanced their leadership skills through these difficult times, right? And they never shy away from bad decisions, right? Because those are the learning opportunities. So they do this run across campus at 7 a.m. in the morning, and it's awesome because you stop at several statues, and each statue has a history lesson behind it, and it's become a symbol of something that you need to understand, right? At the same time, West Point was such a strategic location, and it experienced success and failure as well, right? So it just teaches you so much about strategy and why it's not just about, this is my strategy, this is what I'm going to follow, and they just sit back and relax, right? It's also about, look at the people, look at the policies, look at the processes, look at the system, right? What are your failure points? How can you lose? Game theory, so many different things, right? So just very, very enriching experience. I think anybody who's ever kind of wants to manage a team, become a leader, it's just a beautiful, beautiful place to be. And the experience just was second to none. So I'm very thankful that Raytheon kind of, ended up doing this for their entire management.
Very cool. Yeah. So I actually go because my son is in the Cub Scouts. So every year we go to one of the games in October, and it's at West Point. And so I've got to say, it's such a cool campus. I mean, it's a lot of hills, but and it's kind of you're driving through like what seems like kind of like castle walls and it's a little bit all over the place, but it's a very cool campus, and it's always fun to watch when they score. You've got the cannons that go off.
Oh my goodness.
And then everybody does push-ups. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's pretty cool. It's and then they also have the paratroopers that come down during the game, and it's pretty cool. It's during homecoming is when they do it, so it's really cool.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And the other thing, it's part of the course, but the hills part, right? That reminded me. So one part of the entire course is they just put you into random groups, right? And this is across Raytheon, so you're meeting folks you've never met. Sure. And that you'll probably never work with because it's such a large company. And so what they do is they assign you about, a group of 6 people. And each of the 6 has a role, a very, very specific role, right? So one person stays on base. That's kind of the command center. And then the rest of the 5 have to go around campus. And it's kind of a scavenger hunt of sorts, right? But each person has a very specific role in that kind of game, right? And that just teaches you roles and responsibilities, because all of the information is disseminated only to the person that's at the command center. And then it's up to that person to then disseminate the information. The clue can only be kind of read out using this anagram sheet that only one person on the team has. And then the final answer can only be communicated back to command center by one person who has kind of the phone or the pager. One person on the team only has a map, and they're supposed to navigate who goes where. At no point can you split up. So you all have to stay together and climb all these freaking hills and whatnot together, right?
Yeah.
So it teaches you kind of the no man left behind philosophy, and you have to complete the entire circuit in a specific amount of time, right? So there's that time pressure added as well. Yeah. And at any point, they could just change certain rules, right? At any point, right? So it adds that uncertainty element to it as well. So yeah, it just, all this put together with those hills and stuff, I was sweating buckets at the end of that session, right? But we completed, and it just gives you this sense of fulfillment. And it taught me so much that 2-3 hour session, I was stepping out of my role so many times and doing stuff that I absolutely should not be doing, right? And, it just gave you this perspective of everybody in the team has a specific role, and you need to optimize your time in that role, right? Versus stepping out and trying to see how someone else can do their job better. And so it just, oh my God, that's the place teaches you so much. The session taught me so much, and the hills as well were just memorable.
Well, Garrick, what do you think? Cool. Is this our next visual approach, collateral verifications offsite?
Sure. I gotta start working out, but yeah, because I've done those hills, and yeah, it's definitely they're steep.
Yeah, they're steep. It'll just be you and me.
Yeah, they might throw us out. I don't know. I don't think they'll appreciate just 2 random guys walking around.
Sir, are you okay? Do you need a wheelchair?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that before. No, that's fantastic. So your career beyond academia started at IATA, is that correct? Am I getting the order right? Yep. So it went IATA, Bombardier, Pratt, and 12. And I definitely want to get to 12, and we'll talk a lot about what you're doing. But I'm interested in kind of that process. Starting with IATA, what you did there, Bombardier, which of course I know. Actually, I don't know what you did. What did you do there? And then
you did everything you didn't do.
That's a long
Which was
list.
a lot. That was a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Surprised you guys still are talking. I mean,
Oh, it cost me a lot of money to get Ashwin on the podcast. Forgiveness money, he called it.
forgiveness money. Yep.
Yeah. So, let's start at IATA. Yeah, it was kind of the recession time, 2009, 2010. So as much as I wanted to get a job at Boeing and United Airlines and wherever else, it just wasn't happening, right? And organizations like IATA, ICAO, right? They have kind of I don't want to say it's recession proof, but it's nonprofits and the work that they're doing will continue, right? Since it's more longer term driven and it's more consolidative, right? So an opportunity came up to go to Montreal with IATA, which was very very closely linked to my research at the time. So I was analyzing traffic patterns at Chicago O'Hare via my research. And at the time, they were doing the O'Hare modernization program, which means like they were adding runways and doing all sorts of stuff, right? Expansions. So yeah, the traffic simulation kind of was key, right, to that. And I kind of wanted to stay in air traffic management and flight ops and things like that, right? So IATA had an opening in the air traffic management team, and at the time, I jumped at it, right, because there was nothing else. It was kind of outside my comfort zone. I would say, just new country, new place, people speak French. I was slightly nervous about it, but I think the actual experience was again very enriching. So what IATA gives you in general is just this exposure to pretty much every single airline in the world and every single airline department and function, right? And that's just invaluable, I would say. So even though I started off in in air traffic management, we were focused on projects that were kind of optimizing long haul routes. So I think our pilot projects at the time were the Delta route from Atlanta to Johannesburg, using I think a 777, and there was just the route wasn't being optimized based on several factors, right? Because as you all know, an airline generically at the time especially was flying a specific set of waypoints from origin to destination every single day, right? That that waypoint based route isn't optimized daily for winds and other factors, right? And winds are seasonal. So the route that you should be flying to optimize your trajectory in January versus June should actually be different if you want the lowest cost trajectory possible, right? So yeah, the pilot project was the Atlanta to Johannesburg route, and then that kind of meant involving different ANSPs in the US, across the Atlantic, and then even in Africa, right? So got a chance to meet several ANSPs who then had to kind of introduce new waypoints based on these new trajectories and whatnot. And I got some cool opportunities to name waypoints and stuff, right?
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. So,
examples.
yeah.
So give us one. What'd you come up with?
Yeah, so I tried to name one based on my initials, so ASHJAD, but it never went through. So because they were like, no, we have a naming convention that we have to follow. I left IATA, but before the waypoints could be named, so I don't know what happened of it, but I really tried.
Is that why you
I tried.
left?
Probably, I'm like, you're not naming a waypoint after me. This is you, right?
That's it.
But
right.
that's amazing. I didn't realize. Like, yeah, of course. It's like you discovered a star. You get to name it. You discover a waypoint. You get to name it.
Yeah,
Or-
yeah. But yeah, I think it just that gave me a very clear indication of how long things take in aviation, right? Because you know there's the project, then you get the airline, and you get their buy-in, and then you start talking to ANSPs, but then nothing happens until a decade later when ICAO has agreed, and there's so many other pieces that fall into place, right? But it gave me a very clear understanding of what IRA's role is in all of this, right? Just in air traffic management. So then I kind of hopped around. I got several opportunities within IATA to work in the quality team that handles all the IOSA audits, the ISAGO audits, etc. So did a lot of work there. Then I went to flight ops where I was running a few of the task forces, right? So at the time it was called the Meteorology Task Force, which was kind of a result of the Icelandic volcano erupting at the time. So the airlines wanted to get together, make sure that they're proactive before the next volcano erupts and doesn't completely arrest traffic across the region, right? So now they've embedded some other items into it, and they call it the Flight Operations Support Task Force. Right? So yeah, several different stints within IATA. But one thing that I loved to do was just, as I was traveling, I was trying to visit airlines for several projects, right? And what I would do on my days off is I would go and spend time in some of the airline functions that I didn't have an understanding of, right? So I've spent like a day with a dispatcher in Paris with Air France, right? Just watching him what he's doing, right? Then I've gone to kind of the Geneva Air Traffic Control Center at the top and just sat with that guy for like a few hours, right? I've gone to the LaGuardia. Delta has a specific ops center at LaGuardia, right? That just looks over, I think, all of their gates, right? And you can see the two runways intersecting from that view. And I got an understanding of who's doing weight and balance and who's making sure that the aircraft has a gate and all of this stuff, right? So yeah, that's one thing that IATA just gave me, is just a full blown understanding of the industry with breadth and depth, right? Which kind of gave me an indication for what I want to really do when I grow up, right? I kind of started honing in more on fleet and strategy and these routes and networks and forecasting and that kind of stuff, right? So I felt like it, getting that experience showed me very clearly, I'm not a big fan of working in X, Y, or Z department, but I would love to explore these areas more, right? Which led to the next gig and the next.
Yeah, that must have been really cool. It is nice to get like a little bit of each from different angles, right? That's got to be tremendous, but very cool.
Yeah.
So how did you go from that to then Bombardier, right? Where was that switch to get to want to go and kind of work for an OEM?
Yeah. So Montreal is a very big aerospace cluster, right? So there's quite a few options in Montreal, and at the time I didn't feel like leaving the city. I lived there for quite some time, and we were starting a family and stuff, so we just wanted to have some stability from that perspective. So I started exploring different options, but like I mentioned, I was very specific on what I wanted to do next, and that was more getting into the network fleet kind of decision making, understanding the core of how an airline purchases an aircraft, understanding demand, capacity, forecasting, all of that stuff, right? And so at the time, Bombardier was in this kind of a transition period, I would say, in 2016, where they had boosted their sales and marketing team with new folks, new leadership, and they were rebuilding, right? And I would say that in hindsight, just one of the best decisions they've ever made, because that just led to these amazing group of professionals that were outnumbered and just against all odds performed and brought several aircraft to the next level, right? So yeah, I think I was initially hired for a strategy role, but I ended up doing kind of mix of different things: strategy, forecasting, competitive intelligence, supporting sales, and some of the product marketing and the airline marketing folks as well. And I remember Courtney at the time was handling North America, no, all the Americas, right? I think, yeah. And so got a chance to work with him on some really cool campaigns. And I think yeah, just that 2016 to 2018 timeframe was just so pivotal for the C series, which has now become the A220, right? Without some of the campaigns and some of the good work that was put in that time frame, right? That aircraft, I don't know where it would be today. It just some of the deals that we pulled off, I think with Delta, with Air Canada, were just game changers, right? Especially the Delta one, I would say, because that changed the entire market perception, right? And I know
I
you
got
had Richard
stories over
Abulafia.
a few beers
Yeah,
sometime
yeah,
on that
exactly.
one.
Yeah, yeah. I know you had Richard Abulafia some time back as well, and Richard's perception at one point of the aircraft was different, right? And slowly he began to also, speak with us, and he came to visit, and yeah, he was eventually. I think we turned him, right? It was just really awesome to see that that change in market perception between 2016 and 2018. And so my job was to really to forecast long term and to give the company kind of the demand perspective of things, right? Which then could be broken down by region, and then the sales and marketing folks would take it to a customer, and and that would form the basis of how they would address specific capacity growth in that region using some of our aircraft, right? So yeah, very very cool experience. And the highlight, absolute highlight of it all was just to get to work with Courtney.
I'm in a constant state of highlight. I'm always working with myself. Wait, by myself?
Yeah,
Whatever. You know
that
what I
was
mean.
working. Yeah, with yourself. Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny you say that. It does remind me of those times because right now, so I'm building a forecast. I mean, it's detailed by region, by aircraft type, all this stuff, like down to the nitty, the little tiny details. And there have been several times where I've thought, just go find Ashwin. That's the thing about working with a team. It doesn't matter really anywhere. I mean, really, the value of working with a team is you learn who to go to for what. It doesn't have to be. I don't mean their role. I mean, you go to this person because they have this answer. And I do miss that now that I don't have any of that. So
No.
you are top of mind, but in a frustrated mindset where I'm like, I have to do this myself. Like, where's Ashwin when you need him?
You can't rely on me. I don't know any of that stuff. I'm
No.
terrible at it. No.
No, you can't
No,
even
it's-
spell Excel.
What? How does that? What is that? Excel? I don't know. I
Cool,
still
so-
use just a whiteboard.
So you left us. You go on to Pratt, and how long were you at Pratt?
For 5 years.
5 years. Okay. So did you or did you not have any interaction with powdered metal?
I don't think he's allowed to say.
Yeah,
No,
he's
not-
not allowed to say.
That's right. Yeah. That's just mean.
Now you were doing a lot of the same stuff, right? So you were doing a lot of the market forecasting at PwC. Was it? Was that your focus?
So yeah, the focus was PwC, and it was pretty much similar roles, right? I went from Bombardier doing the forecasting to then at Pratt, where suddenly I had a huge team. I think I started off with a team of like 5 direct reports and a total of like 16 people in the team.
Wow.
And I was like, what
Wow.
is going on, right? And that was when I truly understood who wears the pants in the industry.
It's engine OEMs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I knew it.
Yeah. And I was like, wow, there's a team. And it's partly because Pratt & Whitney Canada has such a wide portfolio, right? It's
Yeah.
I came from a very core commercial aviation background, and suddenly, and I thought that was sexy, and that was it, right? And then suddenly I realized, wow, there's a couple of 100,000 aircraft out there that or more, right? Definitely more, that do not belong to commercial aviation, and that need to fly, and they need engines, and there's a huge market out there, right? So Airline Canada has engines for the general aviation market, the PT6s. Then they're into helicopters with the PW200 family and the 210s. Then they're
Doesn't the
into
PT6 isn't the PT6 is like it has some distinction of being like the most used turbine engine in the world, something like that, right?
yeah,
It's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
it's
It's on every
turbine engine.
turboprop you can
Yeah.
potentially
yeah,
think of.
pretty
Almost.
much, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and then they're in the business aviation turbofan segment as well, with different families, the PW300s, the PW600s, the 500s, and now the PW800s as well, right? Which is the newest product. Then there's a huge security and defense market. Then there's the regional turboprops, which I was aware of because of Bombardier, right? So the regional turboprops power the ATRs and the de Havillands now, right? And then there's also APUs, which I was like, what is that, right? And so the Pratt & Whitney Canada portfolio also includes APUs. So there's 5 or 6 market segments out there, and you need a team, right? Because each forecast has different elements associated to it. So the way things were set up there were quite different. There's a strategic planning team which encompasses the forecasting elements, but also plays a pivotal role in each business case for every single new engine that's developed. And then the strategic planning team also has an aftermarket component to it, right? Which is forecasting the parts, the services, MRO, shop visits, everything, right? So it's a huge task in itself. And so the team was, was quite large, right? And you kind of need that. Again, very, very well set up, I have to say, right? Very dissimilar to, the way we did it at Bombardier was, here's your mandate, but you're gonna do, 300% more of other things, right? And wherever you are needed, you're gonna go and you're gonna do it, and you're gonna just whatever the company needs, right? Yeah. Here it was more, very structured. Processes were fairly developed well. You needed some robust analysis to support, the yay or the nays, right? And at the time, I joined at an interesting time where the PW800 was, being developed, right? It was already selected on the Dassault program, which recently hit the market, and also on a few Gulfstream programs, right? So it had a really good placement already, but there's more potential for the PW800 engines, in different business aviation segments, but also if you look at the security and defense segment, right? There's a lot of jets out there that could use that size engine, right? So just new market opportunities is a key piece of the role. And then I also joined, and I was in the thick of it from like the beginning with the whole, is there going to be an NGRT in the future, right? Which is the next generation regional turboprop, right? And if there would be an NGRT, what sort of an engine would that require? And so I think it's fairly public now that Embraer were looking into getting back into the game with the turboprop, right? So again, the assessment, I can't go into too much detail obviously, but the assessment there was just to understand, is there a market? If so, what needs to be done? What investment is required? And what's your payback period, right? So yeah, it was really cool. So that was sort of the first 2.5 years of my tenure at Pratt& and Whitney, and then I moved to the sales and marketing team after that, which is more customer facing. But I was kind of leading the commercial elements for that. So because there's so many customers, there's so many contracts, when you're negotiating with any new customer for any new engine, right, you have to really assess how much room you have to play with certain elements. And there's so many elements to optimize, right? There's a price, there's obviously shop visits, that there's the amount of power you can give them. There's additional ancillary services that are offered as well, right? Which kind of lead to different commercial outcomes, right? So there's a lot of pushing and pulling going on for these items, and obviously the risk that is taken by an engine OEM is huge, right? There's millions, if not sometimes billions of dollars spent into developing an engine, and then if you're not getting the right return on investment, you really can't justify that, right? So yeah, very, very cool. Just that shift, I think, from strategic planning into that more of the commercial customer facing kind of role absolutely told me, yeah, this is kind of where I want to start going into more. Now that I have a decent handle on the strategy and forecasting side of things, I think I want to be in front of customers, right? I want to be Courtney, right? I want to really like sell, right?
Said no one ever. There's your first problem.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to be
Yeah.
like Courtney.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah,
your
the
first
only
problem.
response. No, you
Yeah.
don't. No, you don't.
Yeah. Yeah. But
So-
that's amazing. Like your the breadth of experience that you've had, right? When you think about having like airline interface, as well as kind of networking and fleet, and then switching to manufacturing, but on the aircraft side, and then to that gives you like pretty much almost everything you need to be able to kind of figure out, all right, what do I want to do next? Which is very cool. Now on the Pratt & Whitney Canada stuff. So when you were like for sales and marketing, were you specific to any one product, or was it just across the board where you were also dealing with the biz jets, the turboprops, was it any and all? Because that's also pretty different, right? I mean, those are very different market in terms of dealing with the from the likes of the charter folks or the corporate departments to the high net worth individuals that require everything on the moon, and then passing that on to then all of a sudden the regionals that may or may not have any money, right? It's just all over the place. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's always been across the board, and I, as I got more introduced to Pratt& Whitney Canada, I always wanted any future roles to be across the board, right? I didn't want to really box myself to one product. I don't know why, right? It just, there's just so much to learn because each and every one of these segments operates in such a different way, like you mentioned, right? The market drivers are different. The way the customers view the products are different. Their business operating conditions are different as well. And you're from a business case perspective, when you actually start making money with each of these segments is different, right? Some you're heavily reliant on the back end with shop visits and stuff, right? Whereas some you have the opportunity to actually make money with new engines, right? That's why the term derivative is so huge, because the investment is fairly lower compared to an absolutely new core, right? So yeah, I think that just always was something that I wanted to do is have that breadth. And through the latter years, I also got into discussions with Big Pratt, so Pratt & Whitney US, right? And so whenever we were talking about, let's say, the NGRT, obviously there's some overlap with the E-jets that Embraer has, right? And they had the E2, which had Pratt & Whitney engines, right? So how much of your own market are you eating away at is one question that obviously you have to be able to answer, right? And it's the case with so many different other programs, right? In general, the regional turboprop market and the regional jet market have always had a relationship, right? And some say it's a, you're taking demand from one and giving to the other. Sometimes some say it's more niche products, but there is a relationship nonetheless, right? And I think having having it all under one roof within Pratt and Whitney just gave me the opportunity to work with the folks on the turbofan side in the US quite a bit, right? And then in many cases, as the Raytheon umbrella became bigger, I got a chance to work with the Collins folks as well, right? So I interacted with the strategic planning folks at Collins. And then we also started at some point submitting joint RFP bids. So it was a Pratt and Collins joint RFP bid for certain programs, which had some cost synergies to it as well, right? So yeah, absolutely. I mean, just that breadth was only possible in companies like these, which have so much learning to really gain, right?
Yeah, I'm interested in your take. I mean, as much as you can share on this is a topic that's come up several times on the podcast, but just the shifting business models for the engine OEM segment, right? Where it used to be more back end loaded, and now there are kind of issues, kind of with the new generation, not on the turboprop stuff because there really isn't any new generation equipment necessarily like we're seeing on the narrow body side. But how do you see that evolution of business models playing out? I mean, are we so far into that model of the it doesn't become cash positive until multiple years down the life that we're stuck with it? Is this something that can be addressed on the engine side for a completely different kind of a more I don't know if the right word is sharing a shared with the aircraft OEMs, a more kind of shared experience, because a lot all that well, almost all of that revenue comes up front. You want the airplane, you pay for it, it's yours. Whereas on the engine side, it's more you pay us to fix it. Do you see that kind of continuing? Any major changes in your forecasting experience that may be something to watch out for the future? Without saying anything, of course, that you can't.
Yeah. Uh, I don't think so. I think the answer to your question is I don't see anything changing anytime soon, right? Simply because of the the magnitude of uncertainty that surrounds so many elements here, right? One of it is the push for sustainability. The second is the technology roadmaps that each of the aircraft OEMs and the engine OEMs have. Um, they're different, right? They don't always coincide at the right time in the right place. So I think it's a very wait and see approach that most of the OEMs are taking because they don't want to place their bets too soon, right? I think in order for the business model to really shift, something really really significant has to happen that really pushes them in that direction, right? Otherwise, why should it change, right? Because the rate of return is healthy as of now. So I think it's either that the sustainability push will dictate certain things, or that tomorrow there will be one major breakthrough in the technology roadmap that will just have a ripple effect across the board, right? It's either one or the other, or it could be both, right? But I don't see anything changes until that specifically happening, right? And I think it's more so that you know everybody's just throwing darts right now, right? And they're trying to see what sticks to some extent. And the more smaller darts they throw, the more chances they have of one of those sticking, and then potential opportunities come up, right? So you'll see a lot of demo programs. You'll see a lot of minor stake acquisitions. You'll see OEMs buying stake in things that they have nothing to do with, right? Like you have aircraft OEMs these days buying carbon capture credits and seeing how that space is evolving, right? So there's a lot of this happening out there, but I don't think it's that significant yet that it's going to shift the tectonic plates.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about these darts. 12 of them, to be exact. Tell us
darts.
about... Do you like that? Captain
nice.
Segue right
Nice.
here.
Yeah.
But I'm fascinated to learn about 12, your transition to the company. Just, first of all, what the company's doing, what you're doing, and then kind of your experience in this space.
Yeah, sure. So let me address the transition piece first. I think nothing will make you more aware of kind of environmental impact than working for an engine OEM, right? It's just I just had this feeling that I want to get more into the sustainability space, and I want to just have an impact on that front, right? And not to say that Pratt and Whitney isn't doing anything. That there's so many different projects there. It was quite difficult to lead, to be honest. But I think my perspective was that if you look at the entire technology roadmap, and you look at the aircraft of different categories, and then you look at the timeline for each of these categories of aircraft, and when they get into either a hybrid or a fully electric mode, right? It's the smaller planes that are going towards full electrification, and that'll probably happen in the next few years, right? Because the battery size that's required is fairly small, and as you go larger in size of aircraft, you start to realize that the battery size that's required is doesn't exist today, right? And there's so many other risks associated with full electrification on that front, right? So that's why there's these there's demo programs for hybrid electric on 80 to 100 seat turboprops and jets and stuff, right? That's where we are today, but that is still at a demo phase, and we're not hitting the market till at least 2030 on that front. Mm-hmm. Now we get into the small, medium, and large narrow bodies, right? And by the time we get to really making a huge step change towards sustainability on that front, we're already in 2040, right? And then we get in
50's right around the corner.
Exactly.
That's supposed to be the goalpost, yeah.
Yeah, and that is the goalpost, right? And we want to be net zero by 2050. Mm-hmm. And so the wide bodies may never get electrified, right? They're always going to be some sort of a hybrid or whatever mode. Then there's the hydrogen and alternative propulsion argument, which again is I would say far out, right? Because hydrogen needs space. Space means seats, and how many seats are you going to give up just to carry hydrogen? And it's a loop, right? So my perspective became, what can I do now, and what technology exists now that will change something for aviation, right? And the more I got deeper into this sort of thought pattern, the more I realized that it's fuel, right? There are currently alternative ways to make fuel using several feedstock, right? Agricultural waste, forestry, cooking oil, and then there's other pathways as well. And so I started to research it on that front, and I came across this really cool pathway that actually takes carbon dioxide and then converts the carbon dioxide into kind of an intermediary product and then converts that intermediate product into jet fuel, right? So I was like, wow, this is interesting. And I started to get deeper into that, and 12 came up, right? There's not too many companies that are doing, work along these pathways. So when the opportunity at 12 came up, I was very, very intrigued. And the more I started to talk to them, the more I realized that this is checking every single box on my list, right? It checked the sustainability box. It checked the new technology box. It checked the box that is you can do something right now, and you have to wait a decade to see it implemented. It also checked the customer facing box. It kind of also gave me the impression that it's not like they're it's not like I'm going to benefit from them 100%. They're going to benefit so much from what I have learned as well along the road with my engine OEM and aircraft OEM and airline experience, right? And I felt like, wow, it feels like they need me as well, right? Because in order for this role to be successful, you need to understand how an airline buys fuel, how they buy planes, how they think, how they operate, how it changes their business model, right? You kind of need to understand why an engine OEM would want to test your product, right? And what the nuances are between that product being tested on the commercial front versus the GA front, for example, right? So yeah, it was just I said yes like before they had even offered the job, I think. And so yeah, a little bit about the company and the product. So in order to get to net zero by 2050, we not only have to start using alternative ways of producing fuel and other products, we also have to start removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, right? Because there are going to be emissions from some sources. So we have to start actually removing the carbon dioxide. One of the really cool ways that has come about removing the carbon dioxide is direct air capture. But you can also do point source capture, which is you co-locate next to a factory that has emissions, and you just that pipe, instead of going into the air, goes into your production facility, right? So a lot of companies are doing this, but then they take that carbon dioxide and they store it underground. So it's called carbon capture and utilization and storage, right? And you store that carbon dioxide underground and you get credits for it. But fairly simple. Now, it kind of makes me nervous because we don't know what long-term effects are of storing a lot of carbon dioxide under the Earth's surface, right? And so what 12 does is we don't store the carbon dioxide, but we transform it. So we use that carbon dioxide as a feedstock to produce useful products. And we've done several pilot projects to prove the technology effectiveness, and it works with jet fuel. So we've taken carbon dioxide, produced jet fuel, and it's been validated and certified by the United States Air Force. Then we've done laundry detergent with Tide and Procter and Gamble, and that's been certified as well. We've made car parts for Mercedes-Benz using the same technology. And then we've made sunglass lenses for Pangaea, right, for some of their products. So that the applicability is quite diverse. But in order to achieve the velocity and the economics, we've decided to focus on the jet fuel, right? Because there's a lot of incentives out there to produce jet fuel. We get, the IRA was passed, and we get IRA incentives. Each state in the US has incentives and tax credits if you're uplifting SAF as well, right? So we're benefiting from a lot of these, and so the economics make more sense on that front. So the technology itself is a high level. It's a two-step process. The first step is CO2 electrolysis, right? So our electrolyzer essentially captures the carbon dioxide and it splits it into carbon and oxygen, right? And it does so by applying large amounts of electricity to it combined with water, right? And then the second step is
Those two
Fischer-Tropsch synthesis.
always mix well. Like it's a really good idea.
The second step is Fischer-Tropsch synthesis, which is a gas to liquids process that has been around since World War One, right? So it's a certified process that converts pretty much any gas like syngas or carbon monoxide into liquid, right, or jet fuel in this case. So you configure it in a specific way. And because Fischer-Tropsch synthesis is a certified pathway, the fuel that we make at the end of this is already certified. It's kind of pre-certified as long as we meet certain standard, right? So under ICAO Annex whatever, it's D7566 certified, but we can't we can't use it as is. We have to blend it with conventional jet fuel as per FAA regulations today. So we blend it with conventional jet fuel at up to a 50% level. And that blended product as well is certified as well, right? So no changes needed to fuel tanks or engines. It's drop in, right? So yeah,
Okay, let me see if I understand the pathway here. So you're taking what would you call it? Refined carbon dioxide, or is it just like straight exhaust? Are you getting the pure carbon dioxide, or do you have to create that?
yeah, we're pretty much getting the pure carbon dioxide, but the sources that we're getting it from are more pure than others.
Sure, fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So you're taking CO2, you're with energy and water, you're separating the C from the O2, and then in the third process, you're putting that all into a chain that is, an ane of some sort, that produces this pure, we'll call it pure SAF, that
Yeah.
then gets mixed for regulatory reasons in with jet fuel. So you're effectively, so if I'm thinking about net, right, like the net carbon, this is CO2 that would have been exhausted from probably some other energy extraction. So I keep thinking like a coal plant, right? So a coal plant's burning coal, the CO2, the carbon is being emitted, that's being captured at the source. You are then basically creating free fuel. I say free, but not like, you add energy and water and all that to it. But from a carbon cost, you're getting double use out of that carbon. Because then once that SAF is burned, that carbon is still emitted into the atmosphere. It's really important to understand because I think it's for all the reasons that you join the company. I think it's really important, fascinating, laudable. Pick all your great adjectives here, but I think the one that's my favorite is soon or now, right? That we had the same conversation with Chris Jones, right? They're very different approach, but same kind of intent. But then also understanding exactly what's at play. This is a mixture. So if somebody comes up and says, you're still burning stuff and shooting out the back of the airplane, you're like, no, that's not where the savings come from. Like, you have to understand where the savings comes from. That's why this is so complex, right? I mean, this is, you have to, when you're looking at carbon, you have to kind of draw a line somewhere, and usually it's extraction out of the ground. Like that's a great place to. It was down there was coal or oil or whatever, extraction out of the ground, and now it's going to be put into the air. Where's that net based on what we were going to do with it? But in effect, a 50-50 blend with, we'll call it 12 juice in Jet A, is net half the carbon emission. Net half.
Yeah.
Ish, right? Plus or minus energy and all that put into it. I get that.
Yeah, there's a few assumptions in there, but yeah, assuming so the neat product that we produce has close to, I would say, 90% reduction, right? Versus fossil based fuel. It's not 100 because we account for the fuel being trucked to the
Oh,
final
come on. Yeah,
destination.
I know you have to. It's the right thing
Yeah,
to
I mean, you
do.
have to. Yeah,
Yeah.
is there,
Yeah.
and we account for, let's say we're
Put that in an
getting wind
electric truck.
energy. Yeah, yeah, in the future, yeah. But let's say we're getting wind energy for the electrolysis piece. The wind turbines are are built from fossil based material, right? So we account for that. So we're doing a
Yeah.
very close and neat accounting for this. So
Yep, yep.
90% is the approximation there, and so yeah, if your net reduction on the neat is 90% and you're blending it at 50/50, then you're close to half. Yeah.
Yep.
One thing to clarify is that coal power plants have a very high fossil concentration, right? And they're in effect dirtier. They're one of the most kind of more pollutants, more carbon. So right now, based on where we are in our technology roadmap, we need sort of cleaner sources of carbon dioxide because it costs a lot to make the dirty carbon clean and then to
Yep, I
kind of
get it.
put
Yeah.
it through the electrolysis. So we're focusing on biogenic sources which have low concentration of carbon. So pulp and paper factories, corn ethanol plants, biogas, things like that, right? But yeah, definitely. I think the way the roadmap is shaping up is in the future, we should be able to have direct air capture, and direct air capture, the cost should decrease significantly over the next decade or so. So then folks like us are not constrained to being co-located with some of these factories. We could go anywhere in the world where our electricity costs are the lowest and then just do the direct air capture, right? Versus co-locating next to a coal plant or a pulp and paper factory, etc. Right? And I think that's where we're headed. And I think that's why different pieces of the technology puzzle have to work out, right? For us to truly be sustainable over the next few decades.
So you can mix with 50% Jet A, right? Traditional Jet A. Can you say be mixed 25% with 50% Jet A, 25% 12 juice, whatever you call it, and 25% say bio, like traditional. I say traditional, but like biofuels, but other sources of biofuels. Can that all be mixed together? Is this kind of one or the other? Is it additive? How's that work?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but again, I think you're playing around with certifications a bit there, right?
Okay.
So I think it if a certain mix of these three is optimal and certifiable, then sure, you can definitely do that. But for now, I think we're just focusing on keeping things, kind of least effort based on certification because, as we all know, that piece, the compliance with regulatory bodies and whatnot just takes time, right? So we want to be able to hit the market like soon and be able to produce this without any hiccups, right?
Of
So we're
course.
focusing without the addition of a third kind of ingredient in there. Uh, we're just doing this with conventional Jet A, and so Courtney, you like this and so will you, Greg. But the name
But
of the
not as
product, and
much.
I had no control over this. I promise you. Okay, the name of the product is called E-Jet. Okay,
Uh,
yeah, and so it's called 12's E-Jet, right? So it because it's electrified jet fuel, right? That's why it came about. But it's coming
why
from
not call
the
it? Listen, I'll help you out. Let's call it Jet E.
Jet
Come
E.
on,
Yeah,
dude. It's right
yeah,
there for the taking.
for sure. Yeah, I think in the future that's definitely gonna happen. Yeah, just don't trademark it. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Already done. So, I guess so. Because you're from your standpoint, right? You guys are working on kind of getting this product to market in mass. I would assume. So, what are your current challenges in doing that?
I think the biggest challenge is cost on several fronts, right? So it's already become a lot easier over the last decade to do this, right? Because the technology existed to some extent. It just wasn't economical at all, right? So what is kind of 10 times as expensive now used to be 100 times as expensive a decade ago. So the cost of the material to build the electrolyzers has significantly reduced. All of these incentives have been put in place by the IRA, by states. There's a blender's tax credit now. There's low carbon fuel standards that California, Washington State, and a few others have, right? So there's just a lot of there's a lot of benefits here at this stage. So that's changed. But still, I think just the capex that's required to put a production plant together is just huge, right? And we've kind of already done this. We've done this when we started on the whole fossil fuel trajectory. Big oil companies built, large facilities for billions of dollars. And as an industry, there's been, a few hundreds of billions spent in this entire fossil based industry, right? Now we have to redo it all if we're going to embark on this sustainability roadmap, right? So I think that there have been a few articles with a few numbers thrown out there which are in the trillions, right? And it kind of makes sense if each of the production facilities that we need to construct is going to be between 500 million and a billion, then we need thousands of these, right? In order to produce the amount of fuel that the industry requires. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's the biggest challenge.
1,000 billion, that's trillion.
Yeah, exactly. So right now we've completed the groundbreaking for our first pilot plant, which will produce about 5 barrels a day. So that's about 40,000 gallons a year. And that's in Washington State. It's in Moses Lake, Washington. And it gives us easy access to Seattle Tacoma Airport, where our launch customer, Alaska Airlines, wants the fuel, right? So I think that's it's already stepping stones where we're building a smaller plant, lower capex, but the returns have to make sense. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to really raise money and get project financing, right? So each of the plants have to have a standalone business case associated with it. And that's the biggest challenge right now. So to give you an order of magnitude, there's always going to be a premium that is associated with the product, right? And even after all of these incentives and tax credits add up, it's not at fossil parity, right? Price wise. So the airlines have to really look at this as a long-term investment and pay that premium. Now, the good news is that it's not just the airlines that want to decarbonize aviation. There are a lot of corporations that have a decarbonization roadmap. So corporations like Microsoft, for example, they have data centers and they have business travel that account for emissions in an indirect way. So they have scope 3 emissions, as we call them, that they're now starting to purchase credits for. So as a good example, with the Alaska Airlines delivery that's starting next year, Microsoft will claim the scope 3 credits from that deal, right? So all of the volume that's delivered to Alaska Airlines, Microsoft gets the scope 3 credits and they retire them. So part of that premium can be paid by corporations as well. So we're entering into an era where there's a new business model being created where it's not just the airlines that are paying for the fuel, so to speak. It's corporations and it's the end customer as well, right? And more often than not, it's the business customers that are paying for it. You're also seeing, several airlines offering economy class passengers the option to, offset their trip, right? These days, after you buy a ticket, there's a small little box that says, for $5 you can offset your carbon, right? So there's that voluntary market that's coming up as well that will chip into this premium at the same time. But any future plant that we're making, and we're already looking at our second facility in the Midwest or in Texas, for example, and that is, even if you're looking at a 2026, 2027 horizon, it's going to be close to 800 million to $1 billion of investment, right? And in order to get a good return on that, there has to be a long-term offtake in place, with an, above fossil premium added to it, right? So the cost is definitely challenging, and there's no way to forecast this, right? As much as we want to, as much as I want to, I really don't know 10 years from now, what will the price of fossil be, and will it account for some sort of a carbon tax element to it or not, right? So how do I price these 10-year deals in the 10th year, right? Do I offer a lower premium? Do I keep it steady? If I'm offering a lower premium, how do I know that I'm not undercutting the actual fossil price, because it could be much higher, right? So to speak. At the same time, the technology gives us the ability to do a fixed price as well. So,
That's
so
interesting.
yes, and that's something I love, because airlines have never had the ability to predict their fuel prices 10 years out, right? Now they do, but will they pay a slightly higher premium if it's at a fixed price, right? Because we have long-term power purchase agreements with our electricity providers at our facilities. We know the cost of the material to some extent, right? So we are able to model out 10 years from now. But when you offer a fixed price to a customer, how do we know if it's benefiting them more or us more, right? So there are all these looming questions on the commercial side that we're trying to figure out together, with the industry. And I think that'll dictate a lot of what comes next.
Yeah.
It's an
Wow.
interesting dynamic, right? So they have fuel hedging today, right? So they're buying futures contracts. Instead of buying futures contracts, and I'm sure the price is still higher, they could buy Jet E contracts. I'm just going to keep
Yeah.
saying it until it's a thing.
Yeah, you should. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you also think that with the amount of investment that's been put over the last few years into the eVTOL space, that you would be hearing just the same about people that are investing in companies like 12, right? Because ultimately, the eVTOL space doesn't really resolve much of anything, whereas you guys do. That to me it just blows my mind, right? If you think about the billions of dollars that have gone into certain spaces, like the eVTOL space, like why aren't people looking at putting more money into companies like 12, which will have the potential of having a significant impact in the future of basically not creating more carbon, right? That's ultimately that's what comes down to, right? You guys are not necessarily looking at it from the standpoint of, hey, look, we're going to take out all this carbon. It's more like, no, we're allowing the industry to continue to operate as it should without creating any more carbon than it already has in the past, right? So
Right.
why aren't people like jumping on that to go, oh yeah, and by the way, because you have corporations that have kind of the carbon offset in mind, like, okay, well, so there is it's a pretty good business model there. That to me just blows my mind why we don't see more of that.
Yeah, I think there's a few factors. There's a few of these technologies that really showed promise but haven't worked, right? And I hear about customers being burned by these bridges, like many times, right? Anytime I'm talking to a customer, they're like, yeah, been there, seen that, done that, didn't work. I don't know why will this work? Tell me, right? So I'm seeing a lot of that, and then at the same time, it's also it's a matter of scaling, right, as well, because the technology right now works at a cell level and a stack level. When we put different cells together, we're making stacks. In order to have millions of gallons of production, many of these stacks have to be put together, and you have to have the right conversion rate, the right amount of electricity passing through it, and the whole system has to function efficiently, right? if you're not getting efficiency gains when you're stacking these together, it may not be compelling enough, right? Uh, at the same time, there's other pathways like agricultural feedstock and cooking oil, which will hit a plateau because there's only so much agricultural waste and cooking oil out there, right?
Yep.
So what happens after that, right? So there's so many of these questions that investors are asking about the scale up, the real scale up, that are becoming roadblocks for investment out there, right? So I think it's up to us to really answer these.
Consider as well, those questions and the pushback that you're getting are a couple of notches like beyond. I mean, these are the challenges you get as you get closer. Is really what I'm trying to say, right? These aren't just necessarily bad things. I mean, people are actually asking, "Oh, wait a minute. So this might actually work. So how would this work?" As opposed to, "It's got an electric helicopter that'll fly anywhere and everywhere, and that's awesome. I'm in." Until they start thinking about it. Now, in fairness, the eVTOL market is fine. It is what it is. I think the challenge we're having with it is the sustainability argument and investment due to sustainability into that market. What does it really solve, right? You know, what the eVTOLs will be and what the market is different from what they are maybe from a sustainability aspect. But nobody's asking those questions yet of that space. So it seems like there's a bit of a silver lining that these are hard questions, right? And they're hard questions about scalability and how are we going to ramp this up and what about infrastructure. And at least we're having those conversations now, right? Because we didn't before. So it's just part of the next step.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the more questions we ask, the better to some extent, right? Is because that only means step one worked, then you're asking a question about step two, right? So, I mean, our perspective is we want all the pathways, we want all the companies to be successful because that's what it's going to take to get to 2050 net zero, right? You need all of the battery manufacturers to be successful and all of these smaller planes should be battery fitted, whereas sustainable fuels are really catering to the wide bodies and the larger narrow bodies, which account for 75% plus of the emissions, but cannot be fitted with batteries today, right? And even within each of the pathways, there's some have cost advantage, some have scale up advantage, some have feedstock advantage, right? Everything has to be successful to some extent in order for these volumes to really scale up, right? So, I think the more money pumped in to the system, the better at this stage. And I think that will actually lead to more learnings, which will improve the cost curve and the rate of return.
But this is the true competition today. Really, if we really think about what is in competition today, it's places where investment go, right? And that's where it gets challenging. So I'll use the example of fusion, which has been, I think the joke of fusion is it's always just 20 years away type of thing.
Back to the Future.
Yeah, yeah.
Mr. Cold Fusion.
Not to pick on fusion because that's like, unlimited reward for whatever investment, but it's a lot of investment. That's why I love the idea of having you on, Ashwin, because I know that we could actually have these nuanced conversations. What 12 is doing is really interesting. It's really exciting to nerds like us, and I said this to Chris Jones, and I'll say it to you as well, and I do mean this with all the respect and actually goodwill that it entails, but it's also quite boring in the grand scheme of where money is going, and I think there's a lot to that. That's really interesting. If we're getting down to what works rather than, hey, look what looks cool. And I really applaud what you guys are doing because I think it's for all the right reasons.
So from your standpoint as a company, what's your goal, right? And how and when do you get there in terms of the the amount of, is there a number in terms of this is how much we want to produce over the course of this many years? Like what's the, how do you go about that, right? From a, you know, what are you striving to,
Right.
to be successful?
Yeah. So I guess the long-term consistent goal is to continue to be a leader in the SAF space, right? And to produce volumes that the industry needs, right? And we don't have a specific number to it, right? What we have a number to is our 2030 target. And we want to be kind of, we want to have capacity online that is able to produce more than 500 million gallons of E-Jet or Jetty per year, right? So 500 million gallons per year requires, 10 plus production facility, right? And, then we get into the, 10 plus production facilities could mean X billion dollars, right? Now, our approach is let's do one and let's make all of the mistakes we want to make in that first one so that we then apply the learnings and each of the plants almost becomes like a product, right? So you start pumping out these plants in a really repetitive, consistent manner, right?
You're just
And
going to
that's
put
what
the
the
plants
industry.
at the CO2.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. And I mean, ideally, right, as you guys make the mistakes and make more plants, then it also comes at a lesser cost, right? Because then you will have learned from your mistakes. You'll also have a bit more, mass from the standpoint that now you're buying in scale, right? So that at the end of the day, it's not, we want to get to 10 by 2030. So that's going to be $10 billion. It's more like, well, no, it should be, the first one will be $1 billion. The next one should be less than that and less than that. And right. And that's, which is great. Yeah.
If we can achieve as much as we can by 2030, and I think that plant as a product philosophy, if we can achieve that, then the 2030 to 2050 journey will be much easier, right? Where it's easier to raise capital, the rate of return is consistently improving, so that we can then pass on some of those benefits to the customers who are then paying much closer to fossil parity, right? And yeah, we decarbonize as a whole, as an industry, right?
Yeah. Huh. All right. So I've got one. I know we're running on an hour and a half here, but I've got one last question from my side, and then we'll let you go, maybe. But so you talked about the regional turboprops, right? And so my question to you would be, based on all this tremendous experience you've gotten, over the last probably 15 years, it sounds like. What, I guess, do you think that we'll see a new regional turboprop over the next decade, and what does it look like?
Wow, this is interesting.
Because we obviously there's been a few announcements or that but that have kind of tried, but I think they the approach is wrong in my view. But so I'd be curious to know, kind of like, it seems like people want to do it, but I don't think they're getting it right, and so that's why I have the what does it look like, because I think that's the key piece.
Yeah, and when you say new, I just want to make sure I understand what you mean by it. So you mean clean sheet on the aircraft and engine front?
He knows what he's talking about, Garrick.
I know, yeah, that's an interesting question, right? Because I know that people are playing around with like hybrid engines to add to their stuff, right? But I think more clean sheet design, right? That's there to truly replace what's out there.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, I think the only way that a clean sheet aircraft and engine can be introduced into the regional turboprop market is if it had more than 40% of, a kind of fuel advantage or reduction, whatever you want to call it,
okay.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because otherwise there is no business case, right?
Yeah.
And you can do the 40% or more in a few ways. Either you can be like ultra sustainable and you have a hybrid engine and all of that good stuff, right? Or you have a brand new technology introduced into the market, right? And I've always wondered why someone hasn't kind of played around, or maybe they are playing around in some bunker somewhere with the Tesla model, right? Can we just have the base of the aircraft be a battery, right? And then just put the fuselage on top, and then have propulsion engines as a backup, or whatever you want to call it, right? Um, so, if these really breakthrough technologies are introduced into the market, they will be incorporated at the 20 to 50 and then 50 to 80 seat level, right? First. And I think that's where the regional turboprops really sit, and we know there's a market for them, right?
Yeah.
What we are now trying to figure out, I guess, is the investment worth it? And I feel it's only worth it when you're getting more than 40% of benefit from it, right? Otherwise, you're not going to make the money you want to make, and you're not going to sell planes at the end of the day, which is what we want to do, right?
Which is what
So
happened
yeah,
to Embraer, frankly.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think that's why there's been such a slowdown in terms of introducing any kind of new regional turboprop because of
yeah.
just that, right? Yeah. So I mean, it sounds like I don't think we'll see a clean sheet design in the next decade. It sounds more like we'll probably see an enhanced version of what's out there, which I think it's already being worked on, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't get you to that 40%, right? So yeah, really.
I think we
thank
will.
you. Yeah, you think we will see a new clean sheet design in the next over the next 10 years?
Yeah, there's too many. Well, I mean, it's known and it's out there. There are too many players that are trying to do it, trying to go all electric. I think Heart has they've changed their Heart. They had a
But
change of heart.
that's what 30 to 50 seats, right? It's more like 30 seats, and
Right.
then growing from that. Yeah,
But this is where we get into the question of what does new program mean? Does it mean that there's a huge market that takes over everything, or does somebody actually build it and then go out of business?
yeah.
And I'm not saying that that's necessarily the case either, but things are happening pretty quickly on that small space. I have my own issues with it, but with some of the technologies. But we're right at the cusp. I mean, look, we've been talking about this, Garrick, on just even from the Airbus and Boeing perspective. What's the next thing they're going to build? I don't know. They got to hit 20+% to launch a program that effectively killed the NMA, right? And everybody's kind of waiting for this. Well, if we build something now, is it gonna be obsolete by the time it delivers? That's a real risk.
And that risk exists at every single seat category today,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
We're at that unique point in history where no matter if you're talking about 5-seaters or 500-seaters, that technology risk exists all across the board.
For different reasons, I would make the argument that it exists less so at the wide body level, but we also have the newest technology delivering at the wide body. So, in effect, it kind of balances out. You're absolutely right. Ashwin, thank you for giving me the excuse to just go on these long monologues. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I'm sure our listeners will thank you a lot. Yeah.
That's all right, man.
As they're cursing your name in the background. Yeah.
But thank you for joining us.
Yeah. We'll definitely love to have you back on at some point. Kind of get the latest and greatest on what you guys are doing. But this was great. This was a lot of fun. So thank you very much for making the time to talk to us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was indeed a lot of fun, and good luck with the podcast. I think it's great what you guys are doing, and I had a lot of fun.
So you want to hear what we're working on?
Sure.
Yeah, I bet you do. It's confidential. Dude,
Yeah.
you sent out like 20 emails like, Merry Christmas, we like working with you. A shortage of
Yep.
what?
Of people, right? Probably in hospitals. And so
I don't know.
Just kind of what.
I don't know that empty hospital beds suggests a shortage of people. Like, these cemeteries are empty.
Oh,
We got a shortage.
A shortage of healthcare workers. Yeah, that's right. What are we treating them? Come on. Stop treating people.